Hi, hello, and welcome to Learnstroke's PIB Code, the Press Information Bureau summary analysis for civil services prelims and mains. Let's check out the most important and burning trending news. The first news item talk about technology embedded governance. People have been calling about governance. Governance is the most heated topic of UPSC. Mains GS paper 2, it talks about governance, but this time it talks about technology embedded governance. It can be very important for GS paper mains. So from the exam point of view, GS paper 2 and 3, governance, United Nations agency, technology and facts to quote. In the news item, they talk about the UNCTAD, the UNCTAD high-level policy dialogue was recently discussed. So know what you mean by United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, a prime premier institutions regarding the trade and development headquartered at Geneva, Switzerland. And what do you mean by technology embedded governance? On one side you have the governance and one side you have the technology. Now you know that technology is the world. Technology is the key thing that everything of the world is going to revolve around. So from a governance perspective, it says that you fuse the governance concepts into the technology. That means you embed it into the technology. That is what you called as the ability to transpose the characteristics of standards, rules, regulations, policies, directives into the technical components or systems. On one side you have the governance part, and you integrate the fuse, embed the whole thing into the technical aspect, that so that you have a technically embedded governance system. So this can be a heated thing, so we should take a big discussion on technology embedded governance in the coming sessions. We will definitely have greater discussions on this. Moving on to the next important news item is UK India economic financial dialogue. Very important from the perspective of GS paper 2, 3, international relations, economy of India, and FTQ, facts to quote. Because recently UK India relations and economic gains was discussed. So you know that as a part of UK India economic dialogue, participants from both UK and India participated in this, and the major discussion point definitely was investment, finance, etc. But one important aspect came into this. Apart from they talk about the fintech, they talked about fintech, they talked about gift, the gift city, very important, the gift city, and they also talked about the climate solutions. Because there is a term which we discussed. Let's find out the term. It is called as the CFLI, the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative. Very typical prelims question. You can get, what do you know, what do you mean by CFLI? Or which of the following statements are true regarding the CFLI, the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative? That means CFLI is a platform where the private companies or the private sector's fund is mobilized to find out climate solutions. India is also a part of that initiative now. India has partnered with this to accelerate and mobilize capital in India. So they have discussed about the fintech, gift city, G20 discussion happened, the climate change, the COP26 was discussed, and yes, India-UK financial market dialogue, infrastructure development. So the India-UK FMDI, it's called the UK FMDI dialogue in infrastructure development was also discussed as a part of this. So keep in mind about the CFLI and the important concepts regarding all this. And the next important news is the journalist welfare scheme. Very important from GS paper 2 and 3. Schemes, committees, role of media, and facts to quote FTQ. Why? Because journalist welfare scheme is a very old scheme, and now why is it in the news? Because a 10-member committee by Ashok Kumar Tandon is appointed to review the working of the journalist welfare scheme. Committee to review guidelines of journalist welfare scheme. Why is this happening? On many, because it is an old welfare scheme and that needs to be looked at with a futuristic perspective. That is number one. And they need to work out a financial arrangement, because India has lost a lot of journalists due to the pandemic. So definitely to the bereaved families, you need to work out a financial arrangement for all this, And most importantly, you need to add the definition of the word journalist, because recently, with the advent of technology, with the advent of systems, a lot of changes have crept in. So that is why the word journalism or the journalist has broadened. That means you need to include the definition of all this into this. So there is a review committee under Ashok Kumar Tandon which is reviewing the journalist welfare scheme. So the most important points, as we said, it's a 10-member committee that will review the journalist welfare scheme. And India lost a large number of journalists, and relook the whole scheme from a futuristic perspective, basing the coverage of benefit for the journalists in this country, find out the financial arrangements, and with the enactment of, here is the most important thing, Occupational Safety, Health and Working Condition Code 2020. What do you mean by the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Condition Code 2020? According to this code, the definition of working journalist got broadened. Previously, they were only traditional people, traditional journalists, the people who were included in that. And now you see that the digital media is also included in that. So there are a lot of issues relating to this. So journalist welfare scheme, the committee will actually review the whole things as a part of this. So remember, this can be important from the perspective of mains or some FTQ, or you can even get a question for prelims also. Moving on to the next important item is Eat Right Station. Very important from the perspective of GS paper 2 and 3, schemes, food security, governance, health perspective and FTQ, because recently in the news, the Indian Railways, the Chandigarh railway station was awarded the 5-star Eat Right Station certification by FSSAI, the food safety agency, and you can find out the Eat Right Station certification is awarded by the FSSAI, and the certification is a part of Eat Right India movement. So this is also important, the Eat Right India movement and the food safety. Read about FSSAI, the food safety, and find out about the Eat Right India movement. That is also here. And this is created, the Eat Right Station is created as a part of the country's food system to ensure safe, healthy and sustainable food for all Indians in stations. So Eat Right Station, and please remember, Eat Right India campaign can be important from a perspective of health. And the next important news item is the Blue Straggler star story from Science and Technology GS paper 3, Science and Technology, and this can also appear as a fact for prelims exam. And especially look out for the area. Stars are very important. They ask, sometimes UPSC might ask questions relating to stars and the composition, etc. So here the topic is blue straggler stars. And what do you mean by this blue stragglers? And also what do you mean by a globular cluster? So what do you mean by blue straggler? First of all, it talks about the blue stragglers are basically the most popular luminous, the bluish color stars in a globular cluster. So globular clusters are basically spherical in shape, and they're bound by gravity, and that is why they are more spherical in nature. So blue straggler talks about various aspects. They talk about what do you mean by clusters, how do you think the blue stragglers are formed. It talks about 3 important aspects. One is basically mass interaction, and one is collision, and next is collision between 2 or more number of stars. So they talk about the how the stars can actually form. And in a cluster, different stars born in the same period, they all are in a part of a cluster. Once they are in the cluster, depending upon the mass, some stars get spin, and after some time some stars break out of the system, which is called as a turn-off. So we'll have to find out all those theories which talks about what do you mean by a turn-off, what are the different theories. Let's quickly find out what do you mean by the concept of blue straggler. Here we go. And blue stragglers are nothing but class of stars on a globular system. What do you mean by a globular cluster? Is a spherical collection of stars tightly bound by gravity. That is why they are very spherical in shape. So blue stragglers, they talk about the globular cluster, and half of the blue stragglers are formed through mass transfers. That means they are formed through mass transfers. Number 2, they can be formed through collisions between 2 stars, and that can be formed between the interaction between 2 or more number of stars. So they talk about the origin theory, and I told you when all the stars are formed, they are together in clusters. That is, a bunch of stars born at the same time are together in a cluster, and depending upon the mass of the stars, the bright and massive stars evolve and move away from the main sequence, which is called as a turnoff. So the stars with the big and massive masses, they move away and they become red giants. Such stars become red giants, and however, later study says that the blue stragglers are brighter and highly bluish and more luminous than any other stars. So it talks about the theory about how the stars got created, and they talk about the concept of astrosat is being mentioned here. For prelims perspective, India's first dedicated space observatory, as well as in the context of blue straggler, they also talk about something called as the Devasthal optical telescope in Nainital. So find about astrostat, what do you mean by the concept of the blue straggler. Find about all this for GS paper 3 science and technology, and for prelims facts, which of the following statements are correct regarding blue straggler. You need to have a close idea about that. Which of the following statements are true regarding globular clusters? What do you mean by globular clusters? So all these are important areas. Now let's discuss about Eastern Economic Forum, or EEF, which is getting a lot of importance in these days. Very important from the perspective of GS paper 2 and 3 international relations, economical impacts, the economy impacts, facts to quote, and prelims MCQ, all important aspects here. Because recently news, we are talking about the 6th Eastern Economic Forum 2021 in Vladivostok. So you need to find out what do you mean by EEF. After find it out why EEF is important for India. That is what we are going to find out. So Eastern Economic Forum, very important keywords to note. Vladimir Putin in 2015 made this concept popular to develop and flourish and give more benefits to the far east of Russia. That is very important here. So the first important point emerging is the Far East. The concept is the Russia's Far East. What do you mean by Russia's Far East? In this concept, you need to understand it was launched in 2015 to mainly give a thrust to Russia's Far East. Russia's Far East is less populated, but you should know it's twice the size of India. So Russia's Far East and Asia Pacific region, that is the region which is actually getting a thrust here. So developing this was the core idea, and since 2015 you should find that more than 17 different countries have invested in the Far East according to the EEF website. So with the aim of supporting the economic development of Russia's Far East and expanding international cooperation in Asia Pacific region. So please remember 2015 Russia, Vladimir Putin, the concept of Far East and Asia Pacific region. More than many countries are investing on this part, and India is also in the front line, because India is always on the front line whenever it comes to India-Russia relations. So this time also India is on the front line, because Russia talk about the Far East and India is acting according to the foreign policy. We have the Act East. We have the Act East policy. India has got the Act East policy. And India was the first country in the world to open a consulate in Vladivostok. So this is very important in this concept. And what are the benefits India is getting? India is basically looking at this from a perspective of trade and energy. That is why it is called the whole Eastern Economic Forum for India. They call it as the trade and energy bridge. It's a trade and energy bridge. That is a key FTQ, trade and energy bridge between India and Russia. And the most important burning concept, the Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor is being discussed. What is the importance of Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor? Let's find out. They're talking about energy is the major pillar of strategic partnership, and energy and trade bridge between India and Russia. Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor would enable cargo transfers between Chennai and Vladivostok in just 24 days compared to the 40 days via the Far East and trade via Europe. So apart from 40 days, now it is just 24 days. So that is why it's apart from that, it's a strategic component. The Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor is a strategic component here. And energy, agro-industry, ceramics, strategic rare earth minerals, Indian steel industry, everything is also a part of this. So please remember the key FTQ, energy, trade bridge between India and Russia. And please remember what you mean by the concept of EEF, Eastern Economic Forum. Please don't forget this concept. So what if you get a question, which of the following statements are true regarding EEF? Or write a short note, how do you think the EEF can significantly alter the geopolitical situation between India and Russia? All these are probable questions, so read it from that perspective. Moving on to the next important item is Mount Trishul expedition. Mount Trishul was in the news, so very important from GS paper 1, geography, mountains and prelims MCQ, because Mount Trishul is being discussed because Indian Navy mountaineering expedition flagged off from INS Trishul, because we talk about the Mount Trishul. Where is it? It is actually in Uttarakhand. The Mount Trishul is actually in Uttarakhand because Garhwal is a region for many famous Himalayan peaks. So it's with an altitude of 7120 meters. Mount Trishul is very tall, and you have three important peaks, the Trishul 1, the Trishul 2 and the Trishul 3. Trishul 1 is the tallest and the highest peak in this. So Mount Trishul, mark your geography correct, it is in Uttarakhand, the Garhwal region of Himalayan peaks. So you knowing the geography of mountains is very important, because match the following questions can appear in prelims. So these were the important current affairs news items for the set 3 September 2021. I hope you liked this session. Subscribe to this channel, Learnstroke, and also share it among your UPSC preparing friends so that they can also benefit from this current affairs. So this is Learnstroke and this is Arjun R. Shaankar, and you are watching PIB Code.